In part 2, George Moore spoke of his admiration for the ability of fellow jockey George Mulley.
I think he was probably the best of my time.
He admitted there were times he and Mulley didn't see eye to eye.
I was really hot under the collar because he had a go at me through one of the races. So I walked around and just hit him in the mouth. I said, here, now have a go now. And I belted him straight in the mouth.
George recalled the worst race fall of his long career.
Did you land on a concrete slab?
No, it threw me into a brick wall, actually.
Did he?
Brick wall.
What was the injury list?
Collarbone, 5 ribs, broken pelvis, 3 fingers, you name it.
He spoke affectionately of his comeback horse, Baguette.
It was the Newmarket, actually. And I jumped him out, he spat the bit out, back to last. I pulled him out about a furlong and a half out and he just blitzed him.
George got a twinkle in the eye when he reminisced about the champion Tulloch.
Look, I rode all over the world. He was the best horse I ever got. And not by a little bit, by a big bit.
George admitted Tulloch's temperament didn't match his great ability.
Shocking. He wouldn't have kept a second wife. He wouldn't have got a first one, I don't think.
That's right. He was a nasty horse, wasn't he?
Shocking.
In this, the final episode, George's charming wife Iris makes her first television appearance, and the great jockey reflects on his spectacular international achievements.
Well, now, your first trip overseas was in 1950 at the invitation or the suggestion of the famous American jockey Johnny Longden. Off you went to the USA and rode a few winners.
That's right. I was first ride ahead on for Red McDaniels. I won. And I won the best race I won there was the San Diego Handicap, which is a group, I don't know whether it's group 1, 2 or 3, it's a pretty big race now. And that was at Del Mar, but I rode I think I rode 5 winners or 6 winners at Hollywood Park. And then I rode another 6 or 7 at Del Mar.
Now, what about the blonde bombshell, Betty Grable?
Yes.
A very big name in movies at the time. In fact, she was the sweetheart of the troops. There wasn't a GI anywhere in the world who didn't have a pin-up of Betty Grable on his locker door.
I think my wife was a better sort. She was a good looking, but my wife was better looking at her. It's
Interesting
true.
that Iris is sitting close by at the moment, George.
Well, I got to keep sweet.
Now, you rub shoulders with some luminaries, including one of the biggest show business names in the world, who just happened to part-own the Del Mar racecourse, Bing Crosby.
Yes. Well, I knew Big before that, actually. I'd met him when I was there in 1939. No, 49. I went over on holiday. When I broke my collarbone, I said I'd go to America and see my friends in New York and everything. I met Big then.
Yeah.
And, well, the next year I went, I knew him quite well.
He loved the races and loved to dabble.
Yes. Very, very nice chap, actually.
In 1957, you went to France and commenced an association with the great trainer, Alec Head. You had wonderful success together.
Well, I went there to ride first for Mr. Wertimer. And I rode 3 winners that year, including the Grand Prix at Deauville. And then the next year I got a call from Alec Head at Lennon's and said to get on the next plane and come over. And I said, I got to ride for the Prince or I'm not coming. He said, no, you ride for the Prince. I said, put it in writing.
We're talking about Prince Ali Khan, who was his chief client.
That's right. Well, it's no good. I didn't want to go back just to ride for Mr. Wertimer. But I'd go back to ride for the month. And I rode 21 winners at the meeting that month. And then that's when I signed up to go back the next year. So.
And so began a long friendship with Prince Ali Khan himself.
Yes. Well, Iris and I were very friendly with him. He was a great guy. And as I showed you in that letter he wrote me, I stayed with him in New York and I got into bed and all of a sudden he said, come on, get out, what are you doing in bed? I said, well, I've got to ride tomorrow. They said, no, you're going to the United Nations ball. I said, oh, you've got to be joking. So we went there, we went straight to the track. I never went to bed that night. Went straight to the track and rode work. And I had to go to the doctor about 10 o'clock. He said, you know, you've got a murmur. I said, it's a wonder I'm alive at all after being out all night.
How passionate was he about his racing?
Well, he loved it, but he loved being the representative for Pakistan, I think it was in those days, in New York. But he just loved to get to the races and have fun. He liked them a bit too.
Give me a quick recollection of the following horses. Sheshoon, upon which you won one of the world's great races, the Ascot Gold Cup.
Yeah, I won the big race in Germany on him too. I won the Grosserbronn Baden-Baden, which was a lovely place. I'd love to go back there.
In Germany?
In Germany, and Iris will tell you, they were so charming compared to a lot of Frenchies. So, but Cheshire, he was a mongrel. He was a mongrel of a horse. You couldn't put him in among the horses to the barrier. I used to stand behind all the time, otherwise he'd kick him and bite him and grab him. He'd try and do anything to you. He was a real so-and-so.
Now, George, when you first went to England, was it a revelation to ride in those long races where they just come out of the barrier and they just hack, don't they? They go sound asleep all on a long, long rein.
Yeah, but you've got to ride, you know, you'd like to think you're going to do funny things there, but if you cleared off, you wouldn't get home, you know. They're not trained to do, they're just trained to be go that speed, and then they can really dash, some of them, you know. But like when I won the King George and Queen Elizabeth on Busted.
Yep.
Well, Busted could lead. That was 1.5 miles at Ascot, at Royal Ascot. And I held him back last, and I just pulled him out after we come into the straight. And I followed Leicester most of the way. He was back third last. And the horse had run second in the Derby to Royal Palace. And he blitzed him. I got it upstairs on the television.
Salvo, the leader at the 2 furlong pole from Bonmo in second place. Then comes Ribocco, Busted unleashing around towards the stand side. It's Salvo now from Bonmo. Busted coming there smoothly towards the stand side. Ribocco coming to challenge too. Salvo being pressed by Busted now. Busted coming there very smoothly to take it up. They're coming to the furlong pole, and Busted goes to the front from Salvo, then Appiani and Ribocco, and then Bonmo coming up towards the line, and it's Busted well clear of Ribocco, Appiani and Salvo, and at the line Busted is the winner. It's a photo for second place with Salvo just holding Appiani and Ribocco.
Now, George, Busted, I think you rated him second only to Tully.
Yeah, right.
As the best horse you rode.
Yes, he was.
Classy.
Class. He actually came over from Ireland after the Derby. He ran fourth at the Derby, I think, in Ireland. And he came over as the lead horse for Royal Palace. But they had to pull him out. Before I got there, they had to pull him out the back. Yeah. Because he was too good for Royal Palace. And the first start, I rode him at Sandown, and he bolted in. And then he won the Eclipse. And then I won the big race on him because he was very unsound horse, very unsound, but great horse. He had really run. Terrific turn of foot.
The 2,000 guineas on Taboon.
Yeah, pretty decent horse. Hell of a turn of foot. He just, when I pulled him out, he just blitzed him. But he in France, he was actually the first ride I had for Prince Ali. I got off the plane and they said, "Come on, hurry up, you're going to Maison Lafitte to ride there today." And I said, "Gee." So I got there and gained no licence. And it was a big race. I've got it here somewhere. And he won by about 6. He just ran it. But Alec gave me the instructions. He told me I had to sit last. I went out and led. I led all the way. Yeah. He won by 6 lengths. And Alec said, "Right, this is the time to go down to the bar." So we went and had a drink.
The 1,000 guineas and the Coronation Cup on Fleet.
Yeah, damn good filly, but a cranky so-and-so. She was a real... Well, the first time I rode her up at York... no, I went way up north of England. She took no part. I couldn't even get her near the barrier. She just wouldn't go near it. So I finished up, I got off her and led her up and stood her there. They said, "Go," and she just wouldn't move. But later on, I woke up to all her little tricks, and I got her to go do everything. But then the next one I rode, I won one on, and then I won the guineas on her. But they had a hell of a job getting her in the gate. They finally got her in, but and she just... Well, she only won by about a neck or something like that. But she was always going to win, but I was always back about 6 to 7.
And now it's Pierre who struck the front as they run down the hill, being pressed by Fleet. And it's Fleet on the far side now, Pierre on the near side. Fix the Date coming to challenge these two. But Fleet for Noel Merlis is just the leader from Pierre in second place. Then comes Lacquer and Fix the Dates and Paulie Girl finishing fast on the far side. Then comes World racing up the hill, and it's Fleet from Pierre, Lacquer in third place. Coming up to the line, and Fleet is the leader from Pierre. St. Paulie Girl on the far side. And it's Fleet from St. Paulie Girl, Lacquer and Pierre.
And now the one that probably gave you more pleasure than any winner you rode anywhere in the world. The English Derby on Royal Palace for Noel Merlis.
Well,
there's something about the English Derby.
Yeah, To give you an idea of his ability, Tulloch would have picked him up and kicked his bum. That's the difference. He was a good horse, but he had a brilliant turn of foot. Soft, very soft horse. Wouldn't have been any good TJ training him. He would have never got him to the post. Well, he'd got him to the post, but he'd been exhausted when he got there. Yeah. He had to be... Well, TJ watched his last gallop, said he can't win the Derby. He said he's not fit. But I said, that's the way he races this horse. That's the condition he raced in. He was a very light, fleshed horse, you know. Yeah. But the only way you could gauge him how fit he was by his wind.
So Noel Merlis knew what he was doing.
Yeah, he knew. He knew. He was a great trainer. What I thought of those sort of horses, they're fine bred, and they couldn't take TJ's methods. Couldn't stand it. They would have won 1 out of 5.
The French Derby was a pretty nice race to win on Charlottesville.
Yeah. Very sad though. Prince Ali was dying to win the Derby and he got killed just before. And it was a very sad day. Actually, I got photos upstairs and the Arga wasn't there actually. He was still in mourning. But all the Alec and Gillan and everybody and Madame Bouillet and Robert, who looked after the studs, they all looked like they're ready to cry, you know. It was very sad.
Well, there's something romantic about the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe. And what a thrill it must be for an Australian jockey to ride the winner of that great race. You did, St. Crispin.
That's right. I won it on objection too, actually. I did win on objection. We dead-heated. I dead-heated with another horse of Batty's, and I protested against him, and they took his half off and placed him second, or they put him back. But at that time, he wasn't a great horse. I'd won the Eclipse on him, but he was a very soft horse, and he'd had a little bit of a setback. And he didn't need any training, very little training. And I won it, as I say, I dead-heated and got it on and Matty never spoke to me. I was there 2 years, he never spoke to me once after.
If there's a regret, if there's a thorn in the side, is it the fact that you never won a Melbourne Cup? And Australian racing history just doesn't sit right without George Moore's name there amongst the Melbourne Cup winners.
Well, I agree with that shot. I'd have loved to have won a Melbourne Cup. I should have won.
You had 19 goes, you know.
Yeah, I know. It was bad average, wasn't it? I should have won the year I ran third.
On Karana?
On Karana.
56.
That's right. That's the first year back after being sent out.
Yeah.
I had a beautiful position. I was posied beautiful, about 6th on the rail. And there was a horse up in front called Sir William, who I didn't want to get near. He would be leader. He used to hang bad. And a certain Melbourne jockey came along and nearly put me under the fence about 6.5 from home, about 1,200 metres from home. And when I got up off the ground, I was out 3 deep outside of this Sir William. And I went round him and pushed him back on the track because they're all getting up inside of us, and a couple got knocked down. And I kicked on and went to the front, and I only got caught the last bit. I got beaten half a head and half a neck or something like that.
Evening Peel and Red Craze.
But if I hadn't been interfered with, and the worst part was I got 2 months for pushing Sir William back. But they never said a damn word to the jockey that nearly brought me down 2 furlongs before. But that used to happen to Melbourne to me all the time. They used to think I was water polo guys. Some of them, they used to just bang me and forget. And then nobody would say a word, but if I banged anybody, TJ he was the same. They had him up, they had me up, any little thing.
Well, I think it's about time we introduced your darling on this show. Right. Your wife of 52 years, although Iris tells me it seems more like 100.
I don't know about that. It doesn't seem like that to me.
Mrs. Iris Moore will join us after this break on Inside Racing. And as we go to break, our cameraman's going to take a stroll around the Moore's magnificent penthouse here on the Gold Coast.
I've got you under my skin. I've got you deep in the heart of me, so deep in my heart that you're really a part of me. I've got you under my skin.
Welcome back to Inside Racing, and George is now joined by his darling Iris, his wife of 52 years. Does it really seem like 100, or is that an exaggeration?
No, it feels like 100, John. You'll
Thanks
kill
very
me
much.
later.
Thanks very much.
Can you put in a nutshell for me your description, your interpretation of life with George?
We've always been in the fast lane, but not anymore. Now we're older. It's been very exciting. I've managed to travel the world, our children also, because of George's extraordinary ability to ride. We've had our ups and downs, but as you can see, we're perfectly happy now.
I'm happy to stay here. I don't want to go to Sydney.
Well, we'll talk about that later.
Take me back to the very first meeting. Now, he can only be described as a cradle snatcher because you were 16 and a half years of age.
Yes. He took me to the beach.
That was good of him?
That was the... Yes, it was. Yes. That was our first date.
Can I butt in here?
Yes.
I had an umbrella when I had the records, the latest records, a gramophone. And I went away, and when I come back, I couldn't get a seat. There was about 8 guys all around looking at her and playing my records. So I went and got a wigwam, you know, one of those wigwams that you... I put that around her, so that got rid of the guys.
No, they were only interested in his records.
Oh.
The latest record.
Probably a Bing Crosby number.
That's right.
Right, yes, that's quite right.
Yeah.
Iris, you had the worry and the trauma of a jockey husband. You also had the worry and trauma of a jockey son.
Yes.
So you had to go through it twice.
Yes. And as you get older, even with George riding, it is a trauma. And then with Gary, twice as bad. And it was for George, wasn't it?
No, not too bad. But you haven't mentioned the day you took John to the race for the first time. He ran off the track and finished in the river.
Fisherman's Ghost, is it called? At Camden?
Fisher's Ghost picnic race.
Yes, yes.
I had Bert Lilly bringing me up to date how he was going. He come back and he said, he won the first. I said, must be no runners. At the 4th race, he's won another one. I said, God, must be no starters for sure. Anyway, next thing I hear, John Moore had fallen off and gone in there's a lake in the middle somewhere. He finished in the lake. He said, nothing to it, Dad. I said, oh, no. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah. There was the director.
So you were at a Sydney race.
I was at Randwick. Bert Lilly kept saying to me.
You were swatting flies at Fisher's Ghost.
Yes, yes. I took the picnic luncheon.
Yeah.
And I was the cheer squad, along with John's girlfriend at the moment. At that moment, yes.
Do you recall one day at Rose Hill when Gary fell in the shadows of the post from a mare called Birthright?
Yes.
Trained by Phil Alotta.
I remember.
George rode, I think, Royal Renee, or the Snowburner. One of the Bill Stripe horses. And George came galloping back.
And jumped off his horse.
Jumped off his mount and virtually let the horse go to check on Gary's condition. It was a dramatic moment.
It was, I remember clearly. And we took Gary in our car to the hospital. And I remember cradling him in my arms on the back seat. It wasn't necessary for an ambulance. George had checked that.
Iris, George was no natural lightweight, and there were times he had to race pretty hard.
Dreadful.
Now, all jockeys get a little niggly when they're fasting.
Of course.
How was he?
Oh, he could be quite difficult, but it was horrendous what George went through. I couldn't have done what he did to see him take off the weight that he did. I think I recall, we only raced on Saturdays when we were first married. So that meant that it wasn't like he was riding every day when we were overseas. And he would put on weight during the week, even though he was dieting all the time, and the children and I could eat anything, and George would just watch us. It was misery for him.
But I enjoyed it.
During his golden years, he had a cult-like following with the Sydney punters. He was a very, very famous person in Australian sport. And you must have been very proud on those days at the racetrack at Randwick or Rose Hill, when every move he made inspired some sort of reaction from the crowds.
Yes.
And we're talking about big crowds in that era.
Enormous, yes. I remember George winning on the Diver. I've never forgotten. The Doncaster,
Yeah, 93,000.
93,000.
That's the Randwick record crowd to this day, you know.
Is it?
1948, Easter Saturday.
Was it?
Yes.
It's still the record.
I remember that. We weren't married, but I was there.
You wonder how they'd fit him in.
Yes, and we didn't find it uncomfortable. I guess we're spoilt these days.
Iris, in the days of pre-jockey managership, obviously the phone would never stop ringing with the offers of rides for George. Did you take a lot of those calls, and did you have to become conversant with the form?
No. No, George rode mainly for Tom Smith, and no, we didn't have a lot of calls that I can recall,
Yeah.
because
His rides were locked in at the
I
track.
think they must have been, yes.
Yeah.
He was so popular. He rode, as you know, so many winners. Wherever we were.
Yeah.
Extraordinary.
Now, Iris, can you recall his happiest moment to a race win, his happiest reaction?
Yes, I can. I was expecting Michelle, and he'd just ridden 2 winners after being disqualified, and I've never seen him happier.
What about his greatest disappointment? Can you remember him walking in on any occasion devastated?
No.
Really down?
No. George had a habit of, after the races, he was the first to admit if he rode a bad race, and he'd punish himself, telling us, my father and I usually, what he should have done, how he should have ridden the horse. He was his own worst critic.
You mentioned Michelle, your only daughter.
Yes,
I've seen many photographs here today in the penthouse,
yes.
but the one that caught my eye and the one that touched me the most was this beautiful photograph moments after George had dismounted from Royal Palace after winning the English Derby, and your little girl, aged about 9 or 10, is running to Dad,
Yes.
breaking the rules.
Yes.
She really shouldn't have been there.
That's right. Yes, that was a very exciting day, especially for Michelle. She has that photograph as well, and she treasures it, like you can see we do.
What is there for the Moors to do? Any ambitions remaining?
Yes, I'd like to sell up and move to Sydney, because we're in our twilight years and we no longer have any family here. We're alone. I hope I can talk George into it.
I'm not saying a word.
But he does miss the family.
You've come a long way for a little bloke from Mackay in Queensland. It's been a long journey, and it must have been a very happy one.
I enjoyed it. It was fun.
We've had a great life.
No,
Thanks to your ability.
There'd be little you'd change.
no. I've had a great life.
Well, watching you both there together, Darby and Joan,
Yes.
I can't think of a nicer way to terminate our interview than for you to plant a kiss on Iris's cheek.
Oh,
Thank you.
pleasure, John.
Australian racing has produced many brilliant jockeys in the 30 years since George Moore called it a day, but most of them can only dream of emulating his achievements. His Sydney record of 10 consecutive premierships is there to be broken. 15 winners of 29 races over the 4 days of a major carnival may never be seen again. There's no Melbourne Cup on his list of big race wins, but it's a stunning list nevertheless. The true measure of his greatness came when he took his Aussie riding skills overseas and showed some of the world's best jockeys a trick or two. Whenever racing aficionados rate the best jockeys of the 20th century, most will have George Moore in the top 6. Some will have him number 1.